because a really great organization can do much more work and people are more engaged. They're willing to give more of themselves. And so we have to check ourselves every morning and remind ourselves that our focus needs to be not only on what we need to get done today, but what we need to do to make sure our team performs at a high level.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Tod Creneti has over 30 years of leadership and coaching experience, beginning with building championship sports teams and later transitioning to business coaching. He holds a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology, which informs his understanding of human behavior and his coaching approach. Tod is known for improving team performance and workplace culture through methods that enhance emotional intelligence, shift mindsets, and operationalize servant leadership. His reputation as a motivator is built on honesty and a commitment to helping others excel. You can learn practical strategies from Tod to implement servant leadership, which can enhance team engagement, foster a supportive culture, and drive sustainable growth in your business. So Tod, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, I am looking forward to this topic. I think it's one that's important and probably not often thought of. But before I get into the questions I have for you on the topic, I'd love for you first to just talk about how you began coaching businesses to improve team performance.
So it's interesting. I'm actually sitting in a hotel in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania today, which is where I went to college. And one of the clients I work with is Gettysburg College, working as a mental skills coach in their athletic department. So it sort of keeps my foot in the coaching. But really, growing up with a father who was a coach and a mother who was an educator, my sister and I both sort of went the route of education, and we wanted to make an impact in the lives of other people like so many had made in ours. And I was pretty sure at the beginning that I would teach and coach or be an administrator and a coach my entire career. I didn't really see a move out of that. And by the time I'd been doing it for about, I'd say 22 to 25 years, I started to develop interests in other things, began to do a deep dive sort of into my own thinking, my own processing of information, really always have been a fan of psychology and interested in the way that we think. And I noticed as I was being invited to do speaking engagements in different places that no matter what I talked about, no matter what my topic was, brain science or whatever, people always wanted to ask me football related questions. And that's where most of my coaching was done. So I started to try and understand the parallels between what I did and the business world. And it turned out that they were many. There's so many different ways. And what I really started to fall into was this idea that what people really want to know is how they can perform at a higher level or direct teams that perform at a higher level. And so as this crossover just continued to grow in my own professional life, I took on a couple of clients along the way, and now I consult full time in a variety of settings, mostly focused on organizational development, building teams that are strong, cohesive, strong at communicating, have meaningful relationships, and drive engagement in the workplace. So really, it's been this arc of always coaching, but just in one setting primarily. And now I'm in a completely different environment. And yet it's the same lessons and the same principles that seem to land even with these clients.
Well, when I read the bio, right, one of the things they said was servant leadership. And I would love for you first to give your definition, really, of what that means, because someone listening may not quite understand. So can you share what that is for you?
Right. I would love to. And I want to sort of preface it by talking about what it's not. If you look at the typical organizational chart, you have one person at the top who has a few people reporting to them, and then they have a few, and we create this incredible distance between the person at the top and the people who are just beginning and just entering the organization. And that's traditionally how we view leadership, right? I want to be the president. I want to be the line leader, if you want to go all the way back to school. And we think that being in the front is the most important role. And yet my understanding is that great organizations require tremendous support. And they
Mm-hmm.
require leaders who are willing to focus on meeting the needs of the people in their charge more than giving directions to the people in their charge. We'd like to
Mm-hmm.
think as we build organizations that we're finding wonderful, talented people, then it's our job to steward and to grow those skill sets. And in doing so, if we're meeting their needs, giving them everything they need to be successful and some guardrails along the way, we can expect success as a result of that. And
Mm-hmm.
certainly for people who are more engaged in the organization and in the growth of others than people that we just tell to follow a very specific set of guidelines along the way. So to me,
Mm-hmm.
servant leadership in the workplace is really about meeting the needs of the people that we're responsible for, but it grows out of my own personal faith and my sense that our job is truly to love other people unconditionally and to even outside of the workplace help them succeed or grow in any way that we can.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree too. I think when we're bringing someone into the company, obviously there's a need for our own company, which is why we're hiring, but we're providing employment and there's probably other benefits that we can also offer and identifying even what are the dreams that they have for themselves so we can feed
Absolutely.
into that too, right? And
Mhm.
help them accomplish their own goals, right? So that's, I try to do that too. And there are times that sometimes you have to be very focused on what the work is because especially for our industry, we have deadlines and everything to meet too.
Mhm.
But at the same time,
Mhm.
we want to care about that person as a person too, and not
Right.
just about a staff member that's doing a job, right? So that's how
That's
we
very
are.
true. And I
Mhm.
love the way you talked about their sort of their hopes and their dreams. I would find myself when I was interviewing coaching candidates to join my staff along the way, that I would always ask them, what's your end goal? What do you want? How do you see yourself? What's the perfect situation look like? If you've made it, where are you standing? And then say to them, keep in mind, it's my job to help you get there. And
Mhm.
as much as it makes our heart stop a little bit when we think about parting with great talent,
Mhm.
helping people reach their ultimate opportunities in life only makes them want to help you more. And they want to
Mhm.
stay connected and they want to stay engaged. And it also attracts other people when they're telling their story of how you supported their ultimate goals and dreams and helped those become a reality.
Mhm. So, if someone's listening to this and saying, okay, well, I'm interested in figuring out how to do this, but I'm not sure what those principles really are to help me do that, can you talk about what they can do to start implementing servant leadership?
Absolutely. I think that it starts with really being a fabulous listener. So many of us who have, built businesses, sort of bootstrap them at some point, put them on our back, however you want to phrase that. We think about all the things that we had to do along the way. And because that list of the things that we still have to do, those piles on our desks, whatever they might be, we're so focused on those things that we can get into this mindset of doing and replicating when really
Hmm.
growing and innovating is what got us to the spots we're in now.
Hmm.
So I think that we forget sometimes to focus on being world-class listeners. We talk all the time about what it means to be an effective communicator, and we talk about our ability to share a message. But how keyed in are we to the people that we work with and that work for us, and into the listening that we need to do so we can understand who they are, what drives them, what excites them, what doesn't, and how we can get the very best out of them every day. So I really believe that being a great servant leader starts with taking the time to listen, to commit to building relationships that are meaningful, right? They're going
Hmm.
to not be transactional. Instead, they're going to be hopefully transformational. And we invest in that first, the listening, the understanding. And then we start talking about ideas to meet the needs they may have had in the past that went unmet. And we share ideas about how best to do that. But by the time we've given them time to share and we've listened enough, we understand them well enough to move in a direction that I think both people feel comfortable with and confident
Hmm.
in.
Well, and someone might be listening and saying, like, okay, well, I understand we need to support our staff, but at the same time, we have work that has to be done, and I have to make sure that people are at work on time and they're getting things done. And yes, I know things happen, there's, life and there's work, and, there's that kind of overlap sometimes too. But so then how do I manage the servant leadership part that I want to get into, but I've got all of these things I have to make sure that are getting done for our customers, and we're meeting, the requirements we have as well. How do we balance that?
That's a great question, and it can be difficult to answer, because I think we can all get caught up in the idea of busy, and it moves very quickly in the direction of overwhelm, and that can
Hmm.
be discouraging. So I remember a lesson that I learned when I was learning how to drive a car, which was that we unconsciously steer towards what we're looking at. And so we might
Hmm.
see something as we're driving down the road on the side of the road, and all of a sudden we start to lean in that direction, and it becomes slightly unsafe. And so I think when we talk about leaders in the workplace, business owners in the workplace, we have to be committed to seeing more than just our list of what needs to happen. We
Hmm.
need to make sure that we don't lose sight of what a healthy, thriving organization not only looks like, but is capable of producing, because a really great organization can do much more work and people are more engaged. They're willing to give more of themselves. And so we have to check ourselves every morning and remind ourselves that our focus needs to be not only on what we need to get done today, but what we need to do to make sure our team performs at a high level. And that goes beyond just this is my mindset in the office. It has to
Hmm.
be our view onto what we do. We're going to
Hmm.
be engaged with other people in meaningful ways in all settings we find ourselves in, and making sure that they have the things that they need to be great while we're doing the things that we need to be great. But if we pick one or the other, needs go unmet, either the needs of my team or the needs of myself.
Hmm. So you use this term operationalize servant leadership, which I have not heard operationalize, used in this way. So I'd love for you first to just say again, what do you mean when you say operationalize servant leadership? And then what steps do we take to actually implement that in the business?
So first of all, I have to give credit to where that word comes from. I work for a great organization in the Sarasota, Florida area, sort of the Gulf Coast of Florida, called Vital Work. And Vital Work is led by two phenomenal female business owners who got together and started this company that really is committed to culture change in organizations. So Rebecca Johnson, Natalie Johnson, not related. That's a word I've picked up from them. And when we think about operationalizing something, we're taking it from this idea that it's a concept
Hmm.
and we're putting it into practice. And if we help other people operationalize something, we're helping them take something they think about or believe in, and we're helping them put it into practice, execute on that idea all day. So when I think about operationalizing servant leadership, I think about how important it is for us to bring that to life in everyday work so that it's
Hmm.
visible throughout the organization. As a culture, this is what we believe in, this is what we support. And so this is not only what we say we do, but it's what we expect to see. And once it's happening and it's a regular ingrained part of the culture that we look for ways to meet the needs of one another and help each other rise, then we've operationalized servant leadership.
Hmm. So I think a lot of times too, when we are all in one room and we're interacting on a daily basis, you sometimes can hear conversations of what's going on in someone's life, or, you'll pick up on things without directly having to ask sometimes. But now we have a lot of
Absolutely.
people working remotely and we don't see each other face to face all the time too. So how can we as leaders really like dig deep enough to find what's going on if they're not necessarily expressing to us right away, like there's a challenge or there's something they're excited about, like how do we as the managers or the leaders, really find out what's important to them and what's going on in their lives so we can be that servant leader to them?
It's such again a great question or a great prompt. And you and I spoke briefly before we started recording about servant leadership, and we shared that it's something we both feel powerfully about. When we're all sitting in a room, in a bullpen, in a teacher's lounge, wherever we might be, and we can hear the lives of each other happening around us. Certainly, we have all that information coming towards us. The challenge of remote work now is we have to make it a point to ask questions and to seek information, because if we don't, it's not the kind of things that people necessarily surrender voluntarily. And so I
Hmm.
think that the question is not just how do we get people to do this, but are we being mindful in the way that we hire and the way that we build our teams, that we're bringing people in that we believe are going to be a good fit in an
Hmm.
organization that believes so deeply in this. And so in the hiring process, just like you and I discussed this at the beginning very casually, it's easy to mention, hey, these are some of the things that we really value here. And you give people the opportunity to respond and go, oh my gosh, that's something I love as well, or that means a lot to me as well, or hey, that's something I'm less familiar with or less comfortable with. And just like we would want to know somebody's technical abilities and background, we also want to know what people's emotional abilities and backgrounds
Mhm.
are. And if it's not something they're comfortable with, does it at least appeal to them? Is it an environment they feel drawn towards? And I think those are things to establish early on. If
Mhm.
we're going to be a house that's built out of cinder blocks or bricks, we don't occasionally throw a board in there. Right. We want to make sure that we're consistent in what we're using to build anything, whether it's a house or an organization. And so identifying people who will be a fit in the culture that we imagine or that we're working towards, that they have similar values, I think that that's a great place to begin.
Mhm. Well, and as you were talking, I was thinking of what if there's someone who just feels it's hard to be vulnerable and share things because maybe they've experienced some type of, negative situations or trauma or something too, and they're not necessarily comfortable sharing all of these things. And so we're trying to interview and not just ask basic business questions, but really get
Right.
to know that person and what their needs are. How do you handle someone who maybe is afraid to share? They might think that that might be used against them at some point or something too. How do you get them to feel comfortable so you could determine, like, is this really someone who's going to work with our company well, and we can actually like enable them to do even better? Like, you know what I mean? I'm not sure if I'm saying it well, but I wanted to make sure that we can identify maybe if someone doesn't show themselves in the way that we would hope, but there's potential maybe if they're developed.
So I think the question you just asked is not an if this happens, it's a when this happens.
Mm-hmm.
There are people out there who are extremely guarded, who feel like they've been treated unfairly, been hurt, embarrassed. There's so many different words that you can apply to that. So if somebody like that walks into our office, we understand that part of what they want to do is come across as being strong and being
Mm-hmm.
stable. And what are the things that we reinforce as strength in our world, right? This lack of emotion, this ability to be focused. And so these are real scenarios that you're bringing up. And one of the things that I like to recommend is that if we're looking to set a bar for vulnerability, the leader has to go first.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that research tells us is that while emotions and positive emotions in an organization are important, the positive organization or the part of the positive emotions of the leader are more powerful within the organization than somebody else. And so
Mm-hmm.
when we go first and we make ourselves vulnerable, and it might mean a more casual sort of interactive interview than people have done in the past, but it's easy to say, I can remember being at a similar part in my career or a similar stage, or referring to something on a resume and going, I remember being in a place like that and how challenging it was. And at that time, you're just kind of gauging their response. And
Mm-hmm.
there are times where they don't even need to jump in, but you can see there's a desire maybe to talk more, but not a comfort level. And near the end of the interview, you can just say, hey, these are some of the things that we value. I want to make sure there are things that you would feel comfortable investing in moving forward. And
Mm-hmm.
they have to then trust us as well enough as a result of the interaction to not only say yes, that they would be willing to move forward, but to practice that when they join the organization.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think someone who might be listening might think like, oh, okay, well, that sounds great to be vulnerable, but I've also heard, as a leader, you need to have that level of respect where someone, sees you in a position of authority where they're going to be willing to do the things that you need done, that you're asking them to do as well too. So how do we balance kind of still being
Hmm.
in that position, where people do understand that we have to enforce that some things need to be done as well, yet still be soft enough, to be a person, to not just, a dictator per se in the company. Like, how do we balance those two roles?
Again, a great insight and a great response that somebody might have to this conversation. Let me start by saying that I think that my approach to leadership is a little atypical, and my belief in people is probably a little stronger than other people. I really do believe that there's so much good in people that are out there. Let me use sort of a measure that I used as a coach. So at the beginning of the season, I would talk to my players and I would remind them of a couple things. And one of them was when I saw them, I was going to hug them. I'm a hugger. I blame it on being Italian, but that's just the way that I am. And I loved the idea of creating a level of comfort with young men with being hugged, whether it was at the movies, or,
Mhm.
wherever it was, in class, whatever. And the other thing was when we talked to each other that I was going to remind them after any conversation of any significance that I loved them. And then that was for real. So
Mhm.
the idea in my mind, and this goes a little bit back to our conversation about faith earlier, here's my belief about how we get people to move in the most effective manner. Number one, we love and support them unconditionally. And especially in the workplace, within the scope of what's expected. Right. That doesn't
Mhm.
mean you can show up when you want to show up, do what you want to do, but there are going to be expectations. So we're going to love and support people unconditionally, but we're also going to hold them accountable.
Mhm.
Ultimately, the leadership, even traditionally, lives with the accountability. If I wanted to be crass, I could just remind you, I still sign your check, and
Mhm.
that sort of thing. And yet positional leadership is worthless if we don't respect the person that we report to, right?
Mhm.
I can have any title you give me. I can be the president, the CEO, the chairman of the board. I can be whatever you want me to be. But if there's not respect for me in that role, then my position is powerless in a lot of ways. And so I think this idea of supporting people unconditionally and then holding them extremely accountable gives them both the confidence to move forward and the feedback to
Mhm.
understand what's moving in the right direction, what's not, what might need to be rethought, and we can have influence. I mean, I'm sure
Mhm.
you've heard the idea of so many people want to have power over, and what we really want to have is power with. And I
Mhm.
am a believer that when you have influence over somebody, you're a leader in their life. You don't
Mhm.
need to have a title to have that. But if somebody's worried about how it is that they could remain still the authority, if you will, I think this idea that ultimately we're going to hold them accountable as well gives the structure that we need: unconditional
Mhm.
support, full accountability, and an open relationship that allows conversation around both of those things.
Mhm. So I'd love for you to talk about then too, how does the servant leadership contribute to building the positive organizational structure? Now, obviously it sounds great, right?
Right.
But I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I would ask you to think back to if there was a time in your life when you were not feeling very engaged at work. And if
Mhm.
you can remember, and not, it doesn't even have to be at work, that you were a part of something where you felt like that you weren't really significant or important, or felt like you had a role, or worse, felt taken advantage of, right? Or
Mhm.
taken for granted. If people can place themselves in that position, then you can remember what it's like to be disconnected from something. So if we create an organization that believes in connection, if we build an organization that reminds you that you're valuable every day and says to you, not only do I believe that you're valuable, but I want you to tell me what tools I can give you, how I can invest in you, how I can support you for you to become even better,
Mhm.
then the growth towards stronger organization happens organically. I want to cast a vision, right, to in front of the entire organization. This is where we're going. This is what we need to execute on. But let's talk about how we're going to do that with transparent leadership, but you're also going to have a seat at the table and we're going to
Mhm.
invite you into conversation. And once I'm in a role where I can give you the things you need to go be great, are you going to want to work anywhere else? If I
Mhm.
respect your ability to lead an organization, are you going to want to leave there to go someplace else where you may not be viewed the same way, trusted in the same way, supported in the same way? I don't think
Mhm.
so. And the other thing is, we all go to places outside of work and we talk about the place that we work and the people we work with. And soon you generate a little bit of a buzz around how your company does things. And you have people sitting at the table going, wow, yeah, that's different from my workplace. I would really love to be in a place like that. And you begin to draw people to the organization. It's almost like you're building a magnet and you're attracting people who want to be a part of something that's unique to their own
Mhm.
experience. And you have people that are that bought in and that engaged. The success that happens from there really is, it's an afterthought. It's a
Mhm.
byproduct really of the process.
Right. Well, I know this has been a fabulous conversation, just digging deep into, this topic, but we are running out of time. So I wanted to ask if you have an offer that you would like to extend to our listeners.
Not specifically an offer, but if you'd like to find me out there in the digital world, you can find me at my website, todcreneti.com, which is TodCreneti.com. Great having a very unique name. The Todd with one D was my mom's idea, and so it's helped me along the way. And then you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Creneti, and in other places as Tod Creneti, and I'd love to hear from you.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Todd, for being a guest on my show and talking about this topic. I really appreciate the discussion we had.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And to the listener, if you enjoyed today's topic and you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.